pass it back to you, Becca, if that makes the most sense to sort of
Yeah.
cue us into the next
I
phase.
think it's helpful to share that both the registry and the foundation teams to date, we interface most with methodology and project developers. And one of our kind of tasks is to digest our learnings from those users and then facilitate that into, how software is being built or the processes and pathways that are being created. And so we've come into a lot of contact with all of the different kind of questions, hurdles, blockers that you all face. And our role in many ways is to solve for those with a software hat, to solve for those with a programmatic hat, to solve for those with a community hat, um, also a scientific one as well. And so what we feel is that instead of trying to create a lot of different working groups or try to shove important kind of collaborative co-working time into community calls, we wanted to consolidate and prioritize practical hands-on time where folks can come and bring concept note drafts, where we can have dedicated times to work through like a particular methodology, where we can talk about verification and do demos about our tech stack or about a project. And there can be an open-endedness and not so much structure so that people feel like they can pop in with a question or they can kind of carve out time. There's space along that spectrum. Uh, for the sake of this call, we'll do a bit more of kind of a context setting so everyone has a feel for the edges of the space, and then try to allow for the majority of this time to really be surfacing like what are the needs, question, blockers that you all have, and us being able to listen. Um, the hope being that these next calls will be that balance between some demonstrations, some targeted discussions, and then time for people to pop in with questions and issues. That being said, the how did we get here is very much on my mind, wanting to share with you all. And then I feel like Austin has kind of arrived at this from a different perspective. And I also want to hold space for how Ned kind of arrived here, even though he's not here. And from my work in 2023, I was partially the Registry Foundation community call. And our community call last year had kind of a rotating cadence between Region Network and the Registry Foundation. So it ended up feeling a little unpredictable for people that needed to know, when can I see you, or when can I learn what's going on? And then the other groups that were kind of happening external were two methodology development groups. One of them was around smallholder methodologies, and the other was around landscape rehydration. And these were born out of kind of, cool, we've got a group of people, they're grappling with the same questions, we should be all working together. And I got really from these groups saying they had been the most helpful, productive, positive time because we actually got into a document together. We went, section by section saying, what should this do? What should that do? And it felt like we all learned a lot together. So I'm taking my intention here is to want to like get our hands dirty and to get sometimes in the theoretical, but sometimes very much in the practical. The other group holding space for kind of Ned here this is meant to also consolidate the efforts of the environmental stewardship meetings that took place last year. These were monthly calls that were meant to ground the emerging framework of environmental stewardship and methodologies under development. Ned did an awesome job stewarding that group, and he felt like it reached a point where it made sense to merge it with this larger effort and to allow for really all of the groups that want to participate in the larger methodology question to come into to conversation. So he was excited to be able to bring the environmental stewardship, that core group of folks trying to develop the methodology, and then our team that we're trying to work on the more emerging framework. Let's combine all those efforts into this one practical space. So what that means is for those of you that might be already working on an environmental stewardship methodology, that this is still the home for that collaborative work, to bring questions, to potentially have a dedicated session to that. It's certainly meant to hold that. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of the 2023 spaces that we held, the learnings that we took away from that, and why we're at this kind of more practical moment. Austin, what about you from kind of 2023 spaces?
Yeah, we had a different perspective, but overlapping in a lot of ways. The Regen Foundation, one of the main ways that we interface with the like on the ground regenerative communities is through the community staking DAO, which is an effort to bring founders level stake to Regen Network to people doing the work of regenerating the planet. And oftentimes the process of communities being formalized into a CS DAO means that they're actively developing projects or methodologies. And so the second cohort of the community staking DAO, which began in 2023, was focused on trying to develop credit methodologies, whether that be through an existing framework or through a more conventional like credit methodology like you might see in Vera or other climate financial registries, or some of the emerging types that are made possible through Regen's approach like environmental stewardship. And yeah, so the general trend is to highlight projects and then present them in a sort of format, and so hopefully we can like, we've been calling this like the big tent hypothesis, which is to get a really big tent and to get a lot of people who are building this stuff together to see what we can collectively conceive and groupthink together. Yeah, I just noting there's like lots of people still coming into the space. This is a really well-attended call, which is cool. I'm curious just if anyone who's currently developing a methodology can like make a reaction in your Zoom with your hand up. If you're someone who's like, I think if you do this too, Zoom will automatically assume that you're doing that. Yeah, it does do that. So if you're currently developing a methodology, would you put your hand up long enough so that you get into that queue, just so we can see who's here?
Nice.
Cool. So for
Hello. It's off camera.
Kika, can you mute yourself?
Nice. 6. Sweet. 7. That's awesome.
Nice. So Becca and I were thinking that it makes sense to do a little context setting because this is the first call and go through the existing spaces that have existed for people to convene and talk about this, because we have a lot of people here and they can see the sort of asynchronous frameworks that we've already developed for people to discuss this outside of the call. And I think that makes sense to start with, Becca. Maybe you can steer us into the high-low world, and then we can get into the like broader discussion.
Yeah, totally. So aside from the registry and foundation community call that I just shared about from last year, the methodology kind of working groups, hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Move your faces, see your faces, sweet, thanks. Excuse me. We between the environmental stewardship community call, which has a dedicated high-low group, we also had the landscape rehydration group and the smallholder methodology working group. And I would say like we used high-low lightly for some of these groups, environmental stewardship more so. And it is interesting to see, I think, when we're thinking about this year, it's like what people actually need when they're sitting down at their computers trying to draft a methodology. Like what kind of questions come up, what kind of support do they need? And that became really clear with environmental stewardship. that became very clear with the methodology working groups. And the environmental stewardship, definitely trying to do justice to Ned's work despite him not being here, is that there were kind of two different documents that were really landing, for the group to collectively work on. And it was like the emerging framework, and then it was the draft methodology for grazing and vineyard systems. What he kind of discovered through this process was that there was an invitation to collaborate on those documents, but that when folks kind of turned back to develop their own methodologies, there was still this kind of blocker, like, where do I start? And what questions should I be asking? Mine's so different from this. So that to take shape once folks had some of the context about these methodologies. That started taking shape in a lot of the methodology working groups. For instance, the smallholder working group, where we're working with one methodology, for instance, that's doing conservation ag. And he's sitting down and he's like, well, I have it all in my head and I understand what's required, but when I sit down, I just still feel like, how specific should I be? And there, especially if you don't have a lot of time to work with, you just don't get something on paper. You don't get a methodology on paper. So the convening around environmental stewardship ended up unearthing a lot of significant kind of questions and challenges that we need to work on as a community, particularly on the buy side, the demand side. But what it pointed to in terms of the methodology and credit design part of it is that we need to work through more use cases. We need to like pull out some more methodologies and kind of work through them together. So we see these different examples, because another one that we have emerging, aside from the grazing and vineyard systems, is a biodiversity methodology by ERA. So we're starting to see these emerge. We need kind of more of that collaborative working space. So that's pointing to this enduring space, the Ecocredit Builder Lab, as come with the draft, come with trying to tactically figure out how to deal with those methodologies. So that's environmental stewardship. And for those of you that have been on those environmental stewardship calls, happy for you all to share and even pop into chat, like if you've had experience with those and how those have been beneficial to helping you move forward or get clarity around how to develop that kind of methodology. I think especially with the CS DAO group, there's a lot of folks that seem to want to make these environmental stewardship methodologies, which is great. And this may very well be a space that ends up being quite dedicated to that work. Anything else, Austin, that you would add to kind of environmental stewardship?
I think it would be great to describe specifically what those projects, who has been a part of those working groups.
Yeah.
Like Smart Ag and GVK and others in the environmental stewardship, just so people have like specifics around locations and regeneration methodologies.
Yeah, good point. So for the smallholder working group, it ended up being kind of like two durable methodologies that were development in that group. And one was GVK Society. So they are in southern India. They're working on regenerative cotton with smallholders. And the other is Mark Eberly with Smart Agro, and he's in Cambodia working on conservation agriculture among smallholders there. And these are folks that do not have a lot of time doing a lot of important work on the ground, but they would really like to create these methodologies. And so what we worked on kind of together, and I'll pull this doc over, is while they were working on their methodologies, I was working on creating a template for methodologies so that someone could go through and just chipping away, I'm going to work on the methodology overview section this week, and this eligibility section this week. And this allowed us to really come to drafts, like to have actual drafts to work with. That's part of the reason why it felt so productive. The other group we were working with was a landscape rehydration group. And those are folks that are based in Australia, California, northern Texas, and they're all semi-arid regions of the world. They have pretty similar constraints and but very different of how to regenerate those landscapes, from building beaver dams to doing kind of larger scale regenerative grazing. And they were all keen to develop methodologies, but they're all at this pretty early point in time where they need to do like stakeholder mapping and figure out who would want to buy those types of credits that they might produce. And so a lot of our time together was finding the commonality, and then trying to get to a point where they could start to draft something. So those are kind of some of the users that we have in mind from last year, where they were like, we want to do the specific work of developing a methodology. Something that Austin and I have talked about, and Ned as well over the past year, was that what is emerging is kind of a core group of methodology, like perspective methodology and credit developers that have incredibly impactful ideas, and they might not have the technical expertise and they might not have the capital to make it happen. So how can we leverage our community and our internal teams' time and expertise to support those groups? Yeah, so that being said, that's kind of like, I think, where we are from last year. Austin, is there anything about CSDAO that you would add for that kind of audit?
No, I think that makes sense. Two of those, both of the smallholder groups are former CSDAOs or are currently CSDAOs. So there's like been a clear process by which the foundation, in terms of bringing, like enfranchising and supporting groups to develop methodologies, is sort of, we're like inadvertently building a kind of funnel. And a number of the second cohort are on this call, which is super exciting because I haven't seen them in a while. So my hunch, or like a general thought, is that I think it would be great. I mean, we meant for this to be kind of unstructured. So I don't know, Becca, you tell me what you think, and others. We have a lot of other Regen Network folks who have a lot of expertise on this call right now. And I wonder if it would make sense for those who are building methodologies to introduce yourselves and talk about what you're doing, and to give some context and try to be specific about the location and the approach, and even like what the challenges are. And I don't know, based off of that, it seems like we have enough people. And I know I'm just like, we didn't really talk about how this would go. So yeah, Becky, you can say hold your horses or whatever. It could make sense to go into breakout rooms where we're intentional about who's going into them, so that we can, after a collective introduction, we can have people do a little bit more focused session on what their projects are and what is and isn't working. And maybe try to really focus the conversation on what is and isn't working, so we can identify the challenges and collectively, at the end of this, compile like what are obstacles and hurdles that we can dedicate our time in subsequent sessions to taking on. How does that sound?
Totally read my mind. And I think folks too, knowing that there are a lot of people on the call to use chat to like throw those challenges in there, and I can save that and like synthesize it afterwards as well. So if things are just fresh on your mind around the challenges that and questions that you have, to pop those into chat. And I think that's great, Austin. Do you want to just start off the process? We can just kind of popcorn around.
Yeah, I'm gonna call on someone, and then I'll let you just popcorn it to the next person, and you can, if you have something to say, maybe you can raise your hand. If you're a methodology developer, will you raise your hand again? And once you're done presenting, you can lower it. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. I'm asking you to raise your hand a second time. Okay, awesome. So the first one I saw is Kevin, who I haven't seen since last fall. Hi, Kevin. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, hey all. Good to see some of the Regen crew.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of Sea Trees. We're a nonprofit that does coastal and marine ecosystem restoration. And we have 20 projects around the world in kelp forests, mangrove forests, coral reefs, coastal watersheds, which we actually consider a marine ecosystem, and a few other things. As a nonprofit, we work with other nonprofits who have their local project they're looking for funding and other resources like technical resources, science resources, and storytelling, and bring those together. And then our funding comes from mostly corporations and individual donors. So we've been running Sea Trees for 5 years now, not using Web3. And we're in the process of converting it to Web3 using Regen as our platform to formalize the methodology and credit creation. And we've been undergoing this process for a while. Cambium, who's part of the network here, is helping us develop this, and we're getting close. We're actually just leaning into the methodology development, and we're going to be doing biodiversity methodologies for each ecosystem that we work in. So there's roughly 6 or 7 methodologies we're producing. And we're working with the Scripts Institutionography to actually develop the science that allows us to measure biodiversity as we move forward. And that's our current status. Pretty excited about how this is going to work. I think we've got, I've been in carbon markets and ecosystem markets for more than 25 years in my career. And we've got some really interesting opportunities that connect various, I would say, coordination failures and help solve them in this marketplace. And Regen is helping make this possible. So I'm super stoked to be part of the crew. And there's a few big announcements coming later this year, which I could tell you about now because they're really exciting, but we're hoping to have one of the first coral reef biodiversity credits at least out there soon.
Awesome. You want to popcorn it to someone, Kevin?
Sure. So Gmo.
Hey, Kevin, I'm super impressed by your presentation, by the way. I caught up with Cole on sea trees. I'd love to follow up with you at some point. Well, at Sylvie, we are actually building a methodology configurator. Now, I say methodology, it's not the exact type of methodology as I think what's being described in this call. We'd like to remain standard agnostic in terms of what eco-credits can come out of the pipeline of the reforestation projects we're working with. So the methodologies where we allow configuration, or we're building configuration tools, are things like defining milestones, logistics, practice that needs to happen, things like maturation of saplings, planting densities, etc. But I'm personally super interested in exploring both permissioned and permissionless tree assets. Permissioned trees would be ones really to as a unit economic and unit of measurement for a project development with, let's say, defined eco credits coming out of it. It could be OFP, it could be an agroforestry framework. I know Sev is collaborating a lot on this stuff. But I think there's with everything that has been going on, I think there's an incredible chance to also build a permissionless tree type of credit. We launched our open beta 4 months ago. We've onboarded 150 users, approaching 1,000 trees planted just from this specific campaign that we've onboarded 17 projects. And I think there's a huge appetite to create a permissionless credit around this movement to sort of just see what perhaps even memetics can accomplish. I'm also excited to work with Econavi finally. So there's also a lot of considerations on how our MRV can help them with their methodology, because I know they're deeply involved in some design work there. Cheers.
Popcorn it, Gmo?
Oh, sorry. Why don't we go, Simon?
All right, thanks for that, Gmo, and looking forward to see where the collaborations go. So as Gmo did mention, we are going to be testing out some of the solutions of Sylvie to make our MRV more robust, because in essence, we are working on a agroforestry focused methodology that is driven by qualitative data and practice based. So I guess something you also pointed out that Sev is working on something similar, and it's something we're considering to see if we bridge efforts. Now, in our case, it is very much focused on Brazil, which is Econavi's, where the Econavi community is really primarily based, and where we have, let's say, close collaboration and rapport with the communities. And there's, I guess, there are two things that I can share to maybe not to be, let's say, redundant. That on the one hand, there's something in the Brazilian context that we're trying to replicate, I guess, in this digital and Web3 scale is replicating a community practice of peer reviewed, like a quality control of certain practices in the field. So like you would have within a given region smallholder farmers who can't access the accreditation or certification for, let's say, organic, an organic label from some big organization far away. So they review each other and have create a stamp for such a thing. And this is something that I guess we're trying to go along with this philosophy. And then as far as the second thing, which I guess is more of a challenge, it's looking at let's say the limitations and trying to overcome the limitations of the carbon market for the needs and the practices of agroforesters, because oftentimes what we've come to see with different players in carbon markets is that you plant a tree, you have a contract for keeping it for decades, which is it can be a difficult commitment for some smallholder farmers who might have a more holistic approach to a certain area, where planting something, but it might be cut to then grow something else, with the idea that the final outcome is a biodiverse and abundant space. And so trying to find how our methodology can reflect that more than individual units, and it's an ongoing process, and working together. So like with people like Gmo from Sylvie and Sunflower Tech and others within the region ecosystem will get us closer to our goals in Brazil and beyond. And I will popcorn it to Howard.
Well, thank you. My name's Howard, and I'm the co-founder of the Colchin Carbon Trust. We're a place-based collaborative natural climate solution developer in Northwest Washington on the Salish Sea. And we were fortunate to be members of the first cohort of the CSDAO and got to work with members of the R&D team on developing a biochar methodology for in-stand application of biochar in connection with conservation burns and kiln burns using air curtain kilns. I'm going to take just a minute to highlight what I think is the biggest obstacle and opportunity, which for us is to have the methodologies in a science-based and credible way count the co-benefits, which in biochar's case are fairly profound, with the ability to retain water, transfer nutrients, and build soil carbon with microbial activity. So we feel like we have something that has immense value beyond carbon, and we're building a program in part on the Regen platform, and in large part in collaboration with local organizations like our conservation districts, other NGOs, and building a supply chain. So that's the nature of our work. We're starting with biochar, hoping to extend it into other place-based natural climate solutions, agroforestry, for example. And we see a tremendous opportunity, and we see Regen Network as the way to replicate a model and draw inspiration from others who are doing this work in different ways in different places. So this is very much a part of our DNA. And I want to pinball it to my colleague, Gabe Travis, who's really been the boots on the ground in developing the methodology. And I think he can have insightful and responsive comments. But I do want to thank Becca and Austin and Ned for convening this forum and for finding a way for us to be able to go deep and collaborate with others on the same journey. And Gabe, if you could take the talking stick and hone in on where we are with the process.
Sure. Thanks, Howard, and thanks everyone for joining here. I think it's really exciting. Feels like we're getting close to the end, or by the end, I really mean the beginning. I think we're expecting credits to be issued in the next 2 months or so. So really excited for that milestone. And, I think from a process standpoint, the big question or the big struggle for us has been, kind of how to make decisions as folks who are not necessarily experts in the field that we're looking at. So, one of the strategies that we've used is to bring in experts through kind of a collaborative work group process in order to, have those decisions kind of ground truthed or, discussed in some kind of, process oriented manner, so that we can, feel comfortable with the assumptions and conclusions that we're making. And that process takes time. That's not necessarily an easy thing. And it's been really helpful to work with the Regen team, as you all have a lot more experience in the credit design side of things. And I think, bringing it back to kind of the practice-based, nature of the work, connecting with practitioners and subject matter experts, that can really be time consuming. So, it's an important process, but, I think we're trying to kind of figure out how to kind of develop a recipe for what that looks like. And, we're excited that there's kind of some potential opportunities for us in the future. We've kind of looked into a grant that would be funding an agroforestry methodology, and specifically looking at carbon, but hopefully some co-benefits as well. And as Howard mentioned, I think the co-benefits are really an exciting area for us. So excited to see where it goes. But I think there's definitely been some hurdles, and I think a forum like this where we could kind of come with specific questions and run through a document, I can definitely see that being really beneficial. So I'm excited that this is a new kind of element of the Regen ecosystem. And with that, I'll pass it to Josh.
You saw them in Africa, you remember?
That's the cutest sound I've ever heard. Michael, can you
I'm
mute
I'm so sorry about that. I didn't know my
good.
baby girl
That was so
pregnant.
cute.
Please forgive me.
Hey everybody, can you hear me all right? I'm calling from the heart of Mexico City in La Roma here. And this is just so exciting that this is making sense for Regen and registry and everybody. It's been such a wonderful community to kind of be on the fringes of so far, but it's been so supportive, and it's so exciting just to hear what other methodologies are being designed and what people are working on, your concerns. As somebody who's been struggling to jump from concept note to a first draft of a design due to trying to wrangle subject matter experts and resources to put those subject matter experts in a room together for a concentrated time, this is kind of a breath of fresh air to see that this is being called for, from your end as well, from everybody else's end. So that's where I'm in early stage, but have come through the registry and have been in consultation with Tika and Ned and others about this methodology, which is focused on rewilding and restoration. I've collected a number of experts who are ready to participate in a process, but again, getting that process jump-started has been very challenging with people in the field and different continents and things like that. So as well as this is a really wonderful opportunity to work through other people's processes and to learn from that in a direct way and apply it. I'm really looking not only at the methodology that we're designing as a credit issuance system, but it also has larger implications for biodiversity metrics writ large, going beyond mean species abundance and discrete metrics, which lack connectivity, which lack relational data, which have a hard time really verifying for ecosystem integrity, ecosystem functionality, ecosystem health. And our methodology hopefully provides a kind of trophic structuring that applies to any biome, any ecoregion. So there's there's a lot of different layers and possibilities, which I'm so excited to be able to workshop, incubate, test out. And I have so many questions, but I don't have the technical expertise to stretch and try out all of the different possibilities. I have a lot of questions. I have a facilitation process detailed and outlined and ready to go. My only hope would be that this would be once a week or twice a week call, but I understand that resources for that are improbable.
I mean, the idea is we start with something, and as the needs arise, we can differentiate and make it more frequent, but we pool the attention and the capacity back together, and then we can see what we need to do. So just to highlight, that's possible based off the demand and where we go. Not to interrupt.
Oh no, I appreciate that. That's clarifying, and it's exciting. But I'm happy to be part of lots of different design groups and be really active and engaged as a kind of exchange for people who are engaged with my group. I'm also super open in terms of collaboration. I feel like our methodology could help or supplement or complement a number of the methodologies here and add additional layers of MRV and crediting. If I'm thinking about the kind of pollination group framework of protections, restoration, and stewardship credits as the three kind of basic credits, we can kind of plug into different models. And Tika, thanks for your note. I'm open to joining with other groups. This is not like it's not a private process. So thanks. Proprietary. I meant proprietary.
Thanks for sharing, Josh. I feel like yeah, you touched on so much of what our intention is for this space. So thanks for speaking that so well. I'd love to get clear on and reiterate almost a lot of what's been spoken about, some of the almost like inherent outcomes of these calls, and hopefully give, are there any other projects?
I think there were a
Folks
few.
that even have like eco-credit ideas. Are there more? Okay,
There were
yeah,
a
would
few
love
hands up that went down, and I'm gonna kind of press on that because it would really be awesome for y'all just to say a little bit. And
there we go.
I see you right on.
Perfect.
Way to
Yeah,
step back
great.
up. Kennedy, I see you too. Maybe y'all can share because this is a good opportunity.
Perfect. Go for it.
James, go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Hi, I'm James. We've been working on a water credit methodology for the past little while. Obviously, we ran into some challenges based on the equipment that we were using with a new technology. Sometimes things have to be shifted, so we're working through that and working on getting the water credits on chain, where we would actually have water as the main component and carbon and other types of impacts as a co-benefit of the credits. So hoping to expand that out. The first methodology of the credit class is around septic waste treatment, but we're looking to add one for grease trap waste treatment, because that's a huge problem that we've noticed is like, and it's tricky to quantify some of it because some of it is completely off the books. Like they're just taking this stuff and dumping it in ditches. So how do you really quantify the baseline of it in some instances? But yeah, that's what we've been working on for the last while. So we've finished the credit class and methodology, the first initial kind of peer review. Been working with with EcoToken. Yeah, so thanks, Kevin. And yeah, we've been working closely with Tika and Sam and the crew, and Regen's been incredibly helpful, and yeah, super grateful for the whole organization.
Sweet. Thanks, James. Austin, who else did you mention? Was it Kennedy?
Kennedy, I don't know if you're still with us, but I saw you raise your hand, and I know you definitely have skin in this game. Are you present on your computer to share a little bit about what you do from Shamba?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, thank you, Austin. So at Shamba, we have been working with smallholders, and one of the methodologies that we are currently working on concerns soils and water, because I think carbon and biodiversity credits, at least those markets are coming up, but we feel like smallholders' impact on soil health and water resources, things like groundwater recharge, it's not yet being measured or quantified properly. So this is one of the things which we are working on currently with about 10,000 farmers in central Kenya. And we are looking at how we can be able to come up with this methodology and hopefully issue credits from them through region. So we are also at an early stage in our work and looking to some of the groups here and this whole movement to be able to get points and support as we work on this. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Kennedy. Was there someone else that you spotted, Austin? Are there others that would like to share
I mean,
projects?
there's like lots, but I'm not sure if I want to how I want to put people on the spot. I feel like it makes sense to go
Well,
into the
great.
breakout room.
Yeah, and I feel like Dave posted some great questions that I'd love for folks to take into some room. So what Austin and I were talking about doing was having projects pop in, like 2 or 3 projects pop in to break and really discuss as a group around like what's working, what could be improved, where could you use help, where are those blockers, and then we'll leave some time to come back and do those share backs. And in many ways, it's for us to all like feel heard and validated, and then for that information to be raw data that's used for us to work on in these future calls. So I'm going to create 3 breakout rooms. Breakout room 1 is going to be, I'm just gonna go with it, GMO with Sylvie, KCT with Howard and Gabe, and Simon with Ecocredit. Breakout room 2, and other folks that aren't involved with these projects, like hop in and just, you know, have dialogue with these folks in these rooms. Breakout 2, Kevin, Wilden, and this is going to be on like an ocean coral based methodology with sea trees, Josh with rewilding and restoration. The 3rd breakout room is going to be James, who's doing water credits with EcoToken, and then Kennedy on smallholders. So if you give me just a moment, I will create breakout rooms.
Yeah, and maybe while
Those.
Becca's doing that, I can offer just some like guiding thoughts. One, if you're like a staff member at Regen Foundation or R&D, just maybe jump in where you feel like is that you're the most helpful, or like, you know, self-assign. And I think if people are in a place where they can say explicitly like what's not working for them or what the impasse is, then you've in a lot of ways already kind of solved your problem, because you've identified where the core issue is. And it might be that things feel like vague or unclear how to proceed. So I would think it would be really great to try to get to a place where people were not to like emphasize the negative, but to try to formalize like what is vague or like feels like an impasse or isn't working in terms of proceeding, and trying to formalize what that is, because it's like we're recording this is incredibly valuable, and we want to like go right at where it seems like the challenges are living. So don't shy away from that, please.
Yeah. I think we're all hungering for it. So I just popped into chat the 3 different rooms with those projects. So whoever's not involved in those projects, hop in wherever. I'll certainly be doing that. And we will ping everyone to come back. We'll leave like 10, 15 minutes to synthesize. So hop in and get to it. You guys had a regen heavy room, but there sounded like there was a lot to dig into. I'm glad.
Yeah, it's been this idea sort of started kicking off in 2022 when we did that blockchain trip to Greenland with Dave Ford.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I didn't know
So
you were on that
Greg,
trip.
yeah, I was on that trip with Greg and Casson. And
Mhm.
like Casson had actually reached out to us and was helping us with crypto donations. This is like 2021. And I realized, okay, it's time to start thinking about how we do blockchain with sea trees. And I've been thinking about it for a while, but it's really happening now. So we're getting closer and closer, and it's super exciting.
Very exciting. Love it.
That's awesome. Welcome back, everybody. We got everybody back in. Sweet. With the time we have our meeting, it would be great to hear what surfaced for those three groups. So Dave, you were just sharing from the group that you were in. If you want to.
Yeah, I'd be happy. And I'll try to keep it brief, and Kevin, fill in any color if you need. So we had a sea trees centric group, which was fun. We have a good ongoing dialogue with Kevin and their crew. He pointed out 3 areas that he could see or would invite support and some additional resourcing around. The first one was C-Trees is considering creating what's called, he called an impact explorer, which is a better way to communicate the ecological data, the related kind of verified impacts and other stories related to their project in a way that services their donors and buyers, philanthropists, and basically their community on the demand side. And I was just sharing, and you'll hear more about this next week, I hope, that Regen Network Development and the whole team is working on project pages that you will all be able to spin up your own project page that has the ability to upload photos and descriptions of your project and whatnot. So we'll be inviting you all to kind of quietly test this and give us feedback next week, which may not serve all of Kevin's needs in particular, but it did match a need that we also identified and are moving forward with. The other part was a support with a project launch when these credits are ready to go. This is something that we're doing with our fellow projects now, as like the biocultural jaguar credits, whether it's a design for digital or physical events or otherwise, supporting that. And then the expert peer review is something that is he invited some support around as well. So anything else, Kevin? Head nod, are we in the...
Well, I would just add for anyone else who's working on your own credits, like one of the most important things is giving like updates that are not database, like photos, videos, media, stories from the field. Like no matter what else happens around any kind of credit, if the person who buys them thinks the credit made a difference somehow, some way to someone else or something else, then they're going to be happier. You know, like with carbon, all the negatives that have happened in the carbon markets have basically come around that carbon projects that were terrible at telling their story. So the negative narrative was not, they didn't know how to counter it. And it just really spiraled out. There's certainly problems. I'm not saying there weren't problems. But as biodiversity starts to bloom and grow, there's gonna be a target on biodiversity credits. So figuring out how to do better stories, photos, and videos, that's what's gonna matter the most to the buyers of these people, as much as anything else. So I'm stoked to hear that Regen's building that functionality in as well.
Thanks, Kevin. Yes, we had room 1. That was the group with Gmo, Howard, Gabe, and can someone from that group share back some thoughts that were had around what's working, what could be improved, challenges?
Well, we had 2 discussions. I can't speak as much for Howard, which was most on the conservation side. I think the big takeaway for the second half of the discussion is just how important aligning on data is. Ishmael shared a really, really cool statement on the efforts existing in parallel to the interest of issuing credits, but also to aligning on data. And that's also not like an overnight job, right? This is the work for years, but I think making sure that we speak the same language will also help us work on shared eco credits. But please feel free to add anything more here from the group.
I think that the two reflections that I really appreciated hearing, one was from Howard. In our group, we had people that were a little bit more mature in the methodology and credit development process, and people that were a little bit newer to it. And I asked Howard and others if they had any learnings, and Howard said that it would have been really helpful to start with thinking about monitoring, reporting, and verification because it's easy to read a methodology and have certain assumptions about whether or not it's easy or how you'd actually implement it, and kind of wishing that they'd put a little bit more emphasis on taking it to the field and really testing out MRV methods earlier on was one takeaway. Demo also shared a really great one about thinking about how you can get local communities into cohorts, and kind of have them share the risk and learn from each other as you're piloting. So those were two things that I really appreciated here, as someone that has worked with a lot of different groups.
Anybody else from that group? Thanks, Sam. What about room 3? So we had James, Kennedy, room 3 group around challenges, needs. What's working, what's not working? Any takers? Must have been a quiet room.
Sure, yeah, no, it was good. We talked a little bit about the European regulation around water credits coming out. Giselle was sharing some things about that was really interesting. Then we chatted about the various water projects happening and the things being developed. And we had a bit of discussion around the demand side of credits that's admittedly nobody's too sure of at the moment. Discussed if they should even be called credits, and a lot about pre-funding project, or a little bit about retroactively funding projects. So instead of creating a water credit and selling those, if there was like a retroactive goods funding for water projects that would release the funding based on observable results of the water treated or water conserved, whatever that may be. So this is definitely an interesting conversation there. If anybody else wants to chime in, that was the high level overview that I got.
Yeah, we also. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say we also spoke a bit about, so Kevin was bringing up from his own exploration the concept of retroactive public goods funding, and talking through to what extent that is applicable to this domain and as a lens through which he might be looking to engage in like some of the work that he's doing. And we were comparing that to like trying to understand retroactive public goods funding as it is sort of like talked about and designed. To what extent is that the same as ex post crediting in the traditional like voluntary carbon market space? It sounds in some ways like you have these two concepts and two different vocabulary sets that are being used in different domains. One, the more crypto industry, one, the more carbon and ecosystem services industry, to kind of talk about the same thing. There are definitely some differences, but also a lot of like similarities as well. And so we were speaking through some of that.
Well, that's super interesting.
I feel like this is a really good group to, like work through the practicalities of what's happening in the projects and to collectively like commiserate and understand what the challenges are. And yeah, so the plan is to have this monthly. I think that cadence can increase, as the specifics and the momentum of the projects merit that. And so just to say that we're definitely open to that, but we want to like create this big pool of thinking and resources and talent, frankly, and then see where it differentiates from there. I could see like the plan for Becca and I and Ned and others at Regen is to synthesize what we took from this and try to make the next session have some pre-structured time at the beginning to directly work on elements of the product or the tech stack that like engage that, or initiatives or working groups that are happening in the ecosystems that are directly taking that on. So then we're going to try to synthesize, we are going to synthesize some of the things that you all have shared and foreground direct like sort of demos and specific aspects for the next session, but we're not exactly sure what that is because we need a little reflection time to do that. One of the things that I think could be really cool is to like have different projects spin up their project pages and like just test out that functionality and collectively explore that. And I don't have more to say, but except for one thing, and that like all of you are in various forms doing, you know, this like incredibly important work around healing the biosphere and human environmental relationship. And you probably know other people who are doing similar work, but aren't like adjacent to Region Network, or maybe aren't into the blockchain or are not Web3 savvy, but are like doing the work. And so this is just a sincere request for you all to consider like bringing a +1 next time. Like, can you pull somebody else in who might really benefit from this to make this circle like one tick bigger? And like, just think through if there's people in your world that you think could benefit from just starting from an open, accepting community, and like, let's make this a little bit broader to have a critical mass of methodology development. Not that it's not big enough already, but like, it would be really cool if each person invited another person next time or over the future. So that's my humble request to you all. I thought this was awesome, and I'm super thankful for you all showing up.
Same too. So aside from a +1, if there are thoughts that you have in the meantime, please pop them into the Airtable form, the suggestion box. It could be like things that you want to see at a future point in time, or the next one, thoughts that you had since this meeting, since everything's settled out, like specific drafts, things like that. Would love to have you all utilize that suggestion as a space that we can pull from and even look at collectively in these next calls. I really appreciate seeing everyone and having a moment to think together about what's really needed to enable a lot more credit generation, allow you all to build the credits that you want to see in the world, and for us to serve that. So thanks for being here. We'll see you next month. Find us in the meantime on Hilo and on all of, you know, the social things. And I'll drop the Hilo link in if anybody wants that as well. Big thanks.
Is momentum building. I feel the power. Thank you all so much. Much love. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Save.
Great job, Becca.
Oh, thanks so much. Saving the chat. So I don't